The wayfinding landscape is changing, so welcome to Endpoint's Wayfinding Xchange Podcast. We want to connect with leading experts, tech innovators, and key contributors to exchange knowledge and innovation in physical and digital wayfinding. We want to shape the future of wayfinding through discussion, collaboration, and shared expertise. And this is why we have created this podcast series. Enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to the Wayfinding Xchange Podcast, where we explore the intersection of wayfinding design and the built environment. I'm your host, Gideon Wilkinson, and in today's episode, we're taking a fascinating journey to Scandinavia. Our guest today is Michaela Olsen, partner, business development and places director at Urgent Agency in Copenhagen. Urgent Agency is a leading Nordic design consultancy specialising in branding, wayfinding and communication. With a background in wayfinding design and teaching at the Royal Danish Academy, Michaela brings a unique Nordic perspective on wayfinding design and the evolving role of user experience in the built environment. So, hello Michaela. Welcome.
Hello Gideon. Thank you.
Welcome to the Wayfinding Xchange Podcast.
Thank you so much.
Happy New Year, and
You too.
It's really good to speak to you, and thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me.
No worries. So I usually start with the individual. So if you could share a little bit about yourself and your role at Urgent Agency, and importantly, what drew you to the wonderful world of wayfinding and design.
Yes, absolutely. As you mentioned, Gideon, I am responsible for our place activation and wayfinding projects at the Urgent Agency, which is a multidisciplinary branding agency based here in Copenhagen. Originally, I'm educated an architect from the Royal Academy, also here from Copenhagen, where I've done my master's in type and wayfinding, which was called back then. So very much focused on this niche that I would still say that wayfinding is somehow, but really digging into that for 2 years. And obviously that was very interesting, and I've been working with it ever since, in different ways.
Great.
So after that, I've actually been at Urgent ever since, so for 9 years. And doing multiple different stuff, but got the opportunity at a moment to build a wayfinding department because we saw that there was a lack of this in the industry and a need for it. So that has been a great journey, and we're now at a pretty good place where we do a lot of exciting wayfinding projects and with great colleagues, also with expertise within this, and trying also to raise some awareness about the discipline in general.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite interesting. I know we chatted before the podcast,
yes.
And you kind of mentioned this kind of lack of awareness in your region. Obviously, from this side of Europe, we look at Scandinavia and it's famous for its art, architecture, design, craftsmanship. So why do you think it is the case that wayfinding in particular feels? Why do you feel like there's a lack of awareness? Is it budget? Is it expertise? Is it just comms? What do you think it is?
It's a really good question. I think it's various things that affect the lack of awareness on the discipline. I think wayfinding places itself different stakeholders. So I would say roughly put like between architect companies, manufacturers, and some agencies like us. There's not really any companies that has wayfinding as a one focus, as the discipline. Like I can see, obviously, which is in your case at Endpoint, and in other various companies in UK and Australia and Middle East and the States as well. And I think that is really great and fascinating. But somehow it's not really like that here in Denmark, and even in the Nordics, I would say.
Mm.
At least in our case, I think a lot of architectural companies actually do the wayfinding themselves at the end of a really long process, and treats it more like an afterthought than, I would say, forethought, if you can say that. So that sometimes is solved great, but often also solved pretty quick, and maybe without a lot of budget left in this long building phase, of course. The solutions, they are lacking also some detailing and strategy before that, of course, and also materiality and conceptual thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because it's handled in that way, um, I think people have an idea of it as being purely functional, and miss this opportunity of experience it as a communicative tool, and also a tool that can connect people to a place.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one aspect of it. I think another is that how it also places itself. How do you say that? So there's not really put aside any money for doing wayfinding.
Right.
So it's like a bullet underneath interior design,
Yeah.
and it says signage, and that is it. Whereas art, for instance, in Denmark at least, it has a much bigger, takes up a much bigger space, and there is money set aside to actually activate art in spaces. But wayfinding is like a sub theme, and I think also because of the rules on how our processes are also puts it in the corner somehow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because,
Yeah.
well, I mean, to give you some confidence,
Yes.
there's situations that sound very similar over here in the UK and other parts of the world that we work. For us, I guess we have seen wayfinding grow as a design discipline that is has now become fairly normal in quite a few new builds as part of it, as a discipline that is seen as something that not every architectural practice will have the expertise to do. Obviously, I think that depends hugely on the client and what the client understands, and how the importance that they place on their visitors or workers' experience. So if that's high on their agenda and they've heard of a thing called wayfinding, then maybe it's something they ask for at that stage of developing a building. I think there's another party at play here as well. So there's, there are big kind of consulting firms, project management firms, real estate consultant firms that help developers put together briefs and design teams. And I think they're far more aware as well of wayfinding as a discipline. So we'll often poke and ask the client at kind of that briefing stage whether that's a service that they'd like to add to their brief. And more and more, we find it has. We get a lot more RFPs asking for wayfinding services now than we did 10 years ago. That's for sure. So I'm sure it will spread to your part of the world, and I'm sure there are still a lot, probably far more cases here where it's as you described. No one's thought about it. Buildings coming to the end of its realization, and an operator or the person who's going to actually start thinking about how the building's being used suddenly goes, what about the signage? And and then there's a mad scramble and like you say, a lack of time a lack of thinking, and a lack of design consideration. You know, walls are already up, electrics, first fixes, and all that sort of stuff's already in, so it can be very constraining. So that definitely still happens here, probably more often than not, actually. But on the bigger projects, and with I think the projects where the clients kind of understand that type of service is available, then it is getting asked for more and more, which is great, I think, for us as a sector. I mean, you mentioned something there about function. You know, people locally to you may see wayfinding as a very functional thing, and you know, I guess for us as lovers of Scandinavian design, you know, that idea of minimalism and function, along with the natural materials and the craftsmanship, do you think that Scandinavian tradition, you know, is influencing signage and wayfinding in the region, the approach, and is it influencing your design decisions as well?
I think so. Yes, very much so. I think also that is what we focus on here at Urgent, also being this cross-disciplinary agency with a very strong focus into place activation and also corporate branding. And I think that combination is crucial when you work with wayfinding, and also, of course, many other aspects, anthropology and spatial understanding, and obviously also some visual and communicative skills. And I think that way of working with it as a holistic element and a process and is pretty Nordic, I would say, at least in the Danish design tradition. So a lot of former architects like Arne Jacobsen, maybe you know, a Danish famous Danish architect, they often they draw the buildings, created the buildings, but they were also much more into the detailing of the buildings, like creating the handles, creating the signs, the furnitures, and sometimes even creating the typeface that goes upon the signage. So there's a German word for this called Gesamtkunstwerk, which is like thinking of everything in a whole. And I think having that in the history still influences the way we perceive design in general in Denmark and the Nordics. So having this, as I mentioned, this holistic approach, I think is special in this region. Yeah.
I think I mean, I'm sure there's been many architects listening. Well, hopefully there's architects listening to this who would still love to have that level of control and oversight. I think, I think in our experience at the moment, certainly in kind of Middle East and to a larger extent here, you know, it's this idea of building a team of experts, and often the architect's still the lead designer, so does have oversight, is still kind of in control of the team, but the team of experts, you know, is responsible for their bit of the building. But I mean, my house is full of Scandinavian furniture. It's it's such a. I mean, it doesn't seem to lose its popularity. What do you think it is? I mean, just slightly off track here. Is it the nature? Is it the materials? I mean, it's always, to me, the furniture especially is the wood that's chosen and the care of it being put together, and the craftsmanship seems to be really key.
Yeah. Oh, that's always a good question, right? But of course, the materiality and also the function. Like there is also a lot of focus on function, and also always been in at least furniture design, but also the minimalism and the craftsmanship and the aesthetics.
Yeah.
And then I think I don't know, this is just me talking, but something about scale also. Denmark at least is a pretty small country, and often our design aesthetics are compared to the Japanese in
Mm-hmm.
terms of being very very minimalistic and simplistic. And I also feel there's a great portion of being humble
Yeah.
in the way you design, and wanting to have a welcoming tone, and getting close somehow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that shines through, if it's furniture design or architecture or even wayfinding, or that there is something in creating relationships to people.
Yeah.
This might be a little more on a philosophical level, but at least I think that is also
Mm.
influences the way
Yeah. Yeah.
of thinking of design. Hmm.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting how,
Yeah,
history, geography, kind
yeah,
of nation
yeah,
possibly influences a whole kind of cultural design. I think it's probably a
yes,
subject for a completely different podcast, but
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's a, it's a
probably.
it's a fascinating subject. I mean, bringing
Hmm.
it back to you
Yeah.
guys, Urgent Agency.
Hmm.
I mean, do you want to talk about one of your standout projects? I know you worked on the Design Museum in Denmark.
Yes.
I think there was a lot of historical reference to typeface and all sorts of good stuff
Hmm.
in that project. Do you want to tell us
Yes.
about that project?
Absolutely. So yeah, so we work with a lot of different companies, big corporate companies who do rebranding or new branding even for bigger companies, but also of digital platforms, and then we have this whole area of space and place where we do wayfinding and installations, pavilions, environmental graphics, a lot of different things. And one of our bigger wayfinding cases, it's some years ago, but we had the honor to work with a Danish design museum. It's called Design Museum Denmark, so
Hmm.
pretty straightforward. But they are placed in the center of Copenhagen, and are situated in an old hospital building, really beautiful historical place. And they changed their name from Arts and Crafts Museum to Design Museum Denmark.
Hmm.
And they did this to be more clear about what they actually are all about, and also what they're displaying. So they're displaying Danish design in various, like both furniture, posters, industrial design objects, and also the whole history of Danish design. Have a large archive with a lot of documentation from our development in design. And when they changed their name, they experienced a lot of visitors coming. Actually, I think the visitor amount rise with like tripled over a really short period.
Mm.
And I think that is back to what Danish design is. If it's famous, it's almost a brand in itself.
Yeah.
People know somehow what it is and wants to see it. So the name change, just which was a really, of course, successful situation to be in. But the museum wasn't really ready to take all these new visitors in, both in terms of their whole branding and strategy, like brand strategy. What are they promising their visitors?
Mm.
How do they appear, and how do they also welcome them in terms of creating a great user experience, with also the wayfinding, of course. So this was a really almost a quattro stagioni kind of in different parts. I don't know if you know this pizza where you have like it's
Hmm.
divided in different. Yeah, so we we did both the brand strategy, so like help them brush up what are they all about, and they got this brand promise called design should be shared, and that was
Hmm.
very much what they were aiming for. So share it with the world and make it like getting out of their boundaries, so to say, in this quite historical and of course, also dusty building, but being more modern. And then we created a visual identity to express this strategy, which was a combination of having some historical anchor, which was based into this typeface that we actually found in their archives, made by a famous typographer called Noah Klint. And it wasn't digitalized and it wasn't finished. So there were some weights he'd started on in the typeface. This is really nerdy into typography, but you have different weights. You have light, bold, regular, and so on. So we found this, and it was a really suitable choice to go with and have this, as I said, a historical anchor, and digitalized it, and then we paired it with some more modern aspects like a vibrant color palette, and made a logo with a D that was cut over to symbolize this sharing strategy. And when we were alongside, parallelly, and we were done with the brand identity, we also looked into the whole user journey. So some of the main pain points were that people couldn't actually find the museum. It's like it's a little bit hidden, and this new color palette enabled us also to activate the space outside and to attract visitors and make it more clear where to go and where to enter. And as an architect, you sometimes also just want to prolong some of this amazing historical architecture and materialities like copper or whatever you could find there that has this tactility and richness. But the case was just different, and there was another need to be more clear. So quite literally, we took the red color and created a red thread through the museum and user journey in wayfinding. So it became these red signs that would then guide you around, and very much in contrast to this actually historical building, but it just proved to be very efficient. And it's a great tool to create clear navigation. So that was an interesting case where you actively go into contrast with something where you might normally would do the opposite, prolong some of that, right? But that was pretty great process.
Are most of your projects branding and the wayfinding, or do you do just wayfinding projects?
Yes. So when we started doing wayfinding, it was actually more in continuation of some branding work, a lot of cultural institutions at the beginning, but when getting more and more wayfinding projects, also being able to communicate about that as its own kind of discipline and focus area here at Urgent, we now have wayfinding as a singular project coming in, and then then there's already a brand identity that we then activate into the wayfinding. So it's much more a standalone, so to say, activity now. Also doing which is a part of the wayfinding, doing some maps for all of the train stations right now, which is a really complex task in terms of accessibility and so on. But so also doing not only signage but also other aspects of the navigation toolbox, you can almost say.
I think that's. I mean, it's something I've noticed, and it's not. It's kind of not a criticism. For there's a lot of branding companies or graphic design companies who move into or start doing signage projects often, because it's often I think for many of them it's seen as it's another means of communication. The scale's a bit different to print, but it's typographic, it's communication, it fits, and it fits. It's almost like sometimes seen as a brand asset. We do the identity. We maybe do I don't know, a website and some other comms stuff, and signage and wayfinding fits kind of neatly into that.
Yes.
Obviously, it's kind of how our business started. It was supporting graphic designers with those projects, because obviously there's a whole technical side to it as well, into delivering a signage project.
Yes.
There's production and installation and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Do you focus more on the design, or do you take projects all the way through to helping companies
Yes, we do.
stick things on walls?
Yes, we do. So I think I imagine that we have quite similar processes as you would have in wayfinding. Like, so, I would also say that has also improved over the years. So where we might have not have, there was not the same willingness also from the clients to actually focus on analysis, user analysis. And also testing in the beginning.
Yeah.
Also the strategy, wayfinding strategy, getting also understanding what is that, because it's not a brand strategy. It's a strategy for how to navigate. How much are we going to be present here? How much help do we need? Who are the target groups and so on? So we always now manage to actually start with these processes before, of course, doing a concept development and also then implement it. And I think that is just crucial in order to make sure that you cover all the needs and that it will work. So that has been a great development. And also sometimes even doing consultancy within an analysis of a space, and then the client or someone else would maybe react upon it. But yes, back to your question. Yes, we take it through to completion, and also we always want to be part of the implementation, also on being on site, and also having the dialogue with the manufacturer. Obviously, when figuring out how the concept should look, what are the costs of a material? Can we do this? Can we do that? How can we mount it? Maybe you have a place where you can't really drill into the walls, or they're going above all of these more technical detailing aspects, also in the conceptual phase. Also, of course, getting a feeling of the economy, and then being on site is almost the best if you can be there to quality ensure. Obviously, also the implementation, and then I would say there's also a whole process afterwards, maybe after half a year or something, then going back and testing, is it working as we wanted to do, or are there any improvements to be done? Because I think it's a little bit naive to think that you can think this solution and then just make it work. If it's a whole new building, for instance, a big new museum opening or something like that, there will always be a need to adjust afterwards. So it's that's also just really important to remember, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that evaluation is often looked at. It's often missed. It's something we try and promote with many of our clients now. Because you're right. I mean, there's so many things. There's so many unexpected things. You can do a lot off plan, but the building needs change. The functional aspects can change over quite a short amount of time. As soon as that building starts operating, that operator finds difficulties or problems. And often, it's down to the facilities management team to put up horrible temporary solutions, and it's what I think it kind of frustrates everybody, including the architect who never imagined that the laminate machine would be used so prolifically. So I think it's really important, and it's sometimes it feels like you're kind of marking your own homework, but I think if you're passionate about that, the experience of whoever the customer is of those spaces, then kind of getting it right is quite, it's obviously really important.
Yes.
You said earlier that you did some teaching at the Royal Danish Academy.
Yeah.
I don't know what you teach. Do you teach wayfinding there? Or is it a general graphics,
Yes.
or what's the?
Before, when I studied at the school, there was a more focused master of this, which I think was obviously great that you could actually take a master's in wayfinding.
Oh,
Unfortunately,
really?
it's yes.
Wow.
But unfortunately, it's not there anymore and hasn't been for many years. So it's kind of been reduced to a monthly course that I've been responsible for some years, and that is actually it, so to say. So that is where the students get introduced to the discipline and get a feeling of what it is. Because I feel that a lot of both students, but in general, people always look a little bit skeptic when you say wayfinding. What is that actually all about? And I understand it because it's a lot. It can be a lot, and I think a lot of people would answer differently into what they feel it is, right? But one thing I think is important is that it's not only signage, which I think is what there's a tendency to think of it as some rather boring flat signs with an arrow and that's it. So yes, I've had the honor of being at this, at the school and having this course and trying to also explain a little bit more about what it is. And also this is a visual communication. So there's a lot of students that just dream of making amazing books and great visual design and posters and all of this visual identities. And I think that they have like a little resistance to the word wayfinding because they think it's really just function and boring. And I think it's important to then present them to that it can sometimes be really fun and a branding element. And of course, this is very contextual, so it depends on where you are. Obviously, in hospitals or airports or some context with a much more rational and practical navigation need. You have some other rules you follow, but in a lot of cultural institutions or office spaces or city areas, you have some more freedom also to work with it as a storytelling element. So, and that has been my at least focus when being at the school to kind of lift it from just some like thinking of it as an arrow and that's it. So that has been great.
And are your students are they graphic design or architecture students? Are they or both?
So they are graphic designers now.
Okay.
So the school has changed over the years, but before it was much more of a merge between architects and graphic designers.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, I think generally there's a real lack of kind of formal education in wayfinding globally. I mean, here in the UK, you would expect. I don't know if you would expect, but you'd expect some schools to be, offering degrees or courses. I think there's a information design MA, which I think Reading University do, which has a really strong wayfinding kind of module to that MA. But it's I'm really surprised when you said that in Denmark they had a master's in wayfinding. I think that's it's really sad that it doesn't exist anymore.
Yes, it is really sad.
As the discipline kind of increases in I guess popularity, you'd think they might reintroduce it, but I mean this lack of formal education. Do you think that's one of the issues with this kind of gap in the industry and this knowledge, this kind of knowledge about our specific sector.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think it would be natural also to have it at the architecture schools as maybe I don't know, at least a course or some semester. It should be on the kind of the list of what you have to learn becoming an architect, because a lot of architectural companies will end up doing it at the end. So being properly introduced to it, what it's all about, the processes, the steps within working with it, also with the whole the anthropological aspect of it, which I think is really important, of course. So I think that because it's not really touched upon through these educations, we don't either educate people into it. So it's also understandable that no one really knows what to do with it or how to go about it. So I think that is also why it's not it's so important anymore. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's again probably subject for another podcast. Wayfinding education globally. Put that on the list.
But I think there is isn't there, Gideon, an education in, as you can become an environmental graphic designer, EGD, that I think that is like a whole in at least in the States, or am I wrong?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
No.
I know
Okay.
Obviously SEGD, which
the organization
is the organization that kind of promotes, I guess, our sector, and that used to be Society of Environmental Graphic Designers. They've kind of pivoted recently to broadening their appeal and kind of rebranded to experiential
design.
So, which again, I think is a really sensible approach in a way. Yes. But I don't know about what I don't know which institutions over there actually specialise in offering those courses. I don't know.
But I think that is great, because I also, it's also pretty narrow and maybe also naive to think that wayfinding should be a whole education. It's not like that, but I think if you can broaden it to being a more like if it's experimental design or something like that, where wayfinding places itself among a lot of other stuff, that could be a way to go about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we both collaborate with lots of other design disciplines, and I think, certainly landscape, lighting.
Exactly.
Even architects, really at the heart of what they do is thinking about people and how they move around their buildings, right? Right at the very beginning when they're thinking about it. I think something gets kind of lost in the process, because designing buildings is complicated and takes a long time. It's you have that initial, I don't know, concept period, and then massive teams of people are detailing every little part of the puzzle, and I think the human being gets lost, and I often think our job is to kind of fly the flag for the actual individuals and the people who are going to use these buildings, and sometimes just turn a mirror to the architects. But the landscape, they're all talking experience. It's all experiential. So how we layer our individual disciplines up, I think that's where the collaboration in bigger teams really, it's really difficult. I think when you're working with individual institutions, it's a lot more direct, and you have a lot more, and also with kind of refurbishment projects, there's pros and cons. You can see how people currently use space. You can see, like you say, pain points and bottlenecks, and you get lots of great information from the front of house staff, and it is kind of more difficult when there's when it's a new building and it's and again back to that evaluation thing. I think it's really important if you can go back. But yeah, I mean, well done for flying the flag of wayfinding locally. It's a brilliant achievement. I think I didn't realise you were from an architectural background.
Yeah.
So that marriage of architecture and type. I mean, there's not many people with that skill set, certainly. So well done for that. I mean, we always end these things about trying to think about the future. Obviously, technology shapes a lot of our kind of approach to built environment now. And how do you see the role of smart digital tools playing a part in the future of wayfinding?
So, it's obviously here to stay and to evolve. There's no doubt about that. But in terms of what role I at least dream of technology having, I think maybe it's going to be a little bit controversial, but I have a little skepticism towards it. I think it should be used balanced. So as a function and add-on to some places, and I think that is also back to the context discussion. So, for instance, I think it can be a great asset in hospitals and airports where you can interact with some digital information, and I think that is crucial, and we already see it a lot today. But as a more general tool into our world, personally, I just feel that we're here. We've always been able to navigate in the world, like historically, through our senses and corpus, and of course the surroundings. So the stars in the very beginning was a guiding element, of course, and then it developed over time. So what scares me a little bit is that we're all going to be like zombies walking around, only navigating through Google Maps or a lens or whatever, and losing the ability to actually interact with our spatial settings and surroundings, and also interact with other people. Because I think we should just rely a little bit more about, like, we know cities, we know buildings, they have a composition, they have a pattern. And if they're well done, they have a pattern that is meant to guide you. So we know we navigate through landmarks, paths, edges. I don't know if you know Kevin Lynch, The City of the Image, which I think is an amazing book, talking about how we can actually just translate the way we navigate cities into buildings and other spaces. And I think that is back to how the senses are activated in a space. And I think the more we interact or use digital tools, the more we weaken those abilities. So that is my only kind of, I'm a little bit skeptic about that taking too much over, and that we were going to lose our, opening our eyes, basically. Yeah. But I still acknowledge it, obviously, as a really effectful tool in some settings. But personally, I hope we will still interact with open eyes in the future, if that makes sense.
Oh, perfect. I think that's beautifully articulated. I think a lot of designers have a similar view, to be honest. I think it's using the right tools in the right place. Obviously, there's lots of new opportunities that these digital tools offer. But like you said, maybe it's your Viking heritage. They were very, they were amazing navigators. I read something that they were the first people to develop a navigation tool, something to do with the shadow of the sun on a in their little boats. I don't know how real
Maybe
that is.
maybe that is the niche of Nordic wayfinding. It's the Viking aspect, Gideon.
Well, that idea of exploration and
Yes.
not being scared of new boundaries, but having the technology to be able to find new continents. That's your future, Michaela. I think.
Yeah, that
taking Nordic wayfinding principles to the world.
Yeah, I will have to explore that.
But I think I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think
Me too.
your thoughts about digital tools. I think it's really resonant with, like I say, a lot of how a lot of designers think.
Yeah.
Obviously, our clients still asking us lots of questions about the technology.
Yes.
But it'll be interesting to see how the future unfolds.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a good time to wrap up. So thank you again so much. We'll put your kind of urgent wayfinding details and things on our podcast so people can find you. But be great to try and work together if we can one day.
It would be awesome. Yeah.
We should try. We should.
Absolutely. Right. I would love that.
Brilliant.
So thank you very much for having me, and it was a great conversation, and it's always really interesting to talk to other, of course, nerds and competent people within this expertise. So thank you very much.
Super. No, thank you. Brilliant. Speak soon and have a good year.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to our latest Wayfinding Xchange podcast. Stay tuned for further episodes and feel free to contact us with any questions and suggestions for future episodes.